Mullins is an actress currently on the hugely successful Emmy-nominated Netflix series Stranger Things. She also stars in FX's new series, Devs, set in Silicon Valley. Before acting in film and on television, Aimee first received worldwide media attention as an athlete. Born without fibula in both legs, Aimee's medical prognosis was discouraging. She was told she would never walk and would likely spend the rest of her life using a wheelchair. In an attempt for an outside chance at independent mobility, doctors amputated both her legs below the knee on her first birthday. The decision paid off. By age 2, she had learned to walk on prosthetic legs and spent her childhood swimming, biking, skiing, playing softball, and soccer with everyone else. While a college student running track at Georgetown University, Aimee enlisted in the expertise of Frank Gagliano, one of the country's most respected track coaches. Through this partnership, she became the first woman with a disability to compete in the NCAA, doing so on Georgetown's nationally ranked Division I track team. So, all right, so you're the first woman to wear prosthetics and compete in a national collegiate association. What does that mean to you? Because this is like really amazing stuff.
Oh gosh, it feels like ancient history to me because it is. It's sort of 25 years ago. But it's gratifying to me that in the last quarter century since I did that, there's just so many more. There's so many more athletes with different bodies playing sports and being, very active and very seen on campus life, all over the United States. And I think we see that here as well too in the United Kingdom, where I am, and more, I guess, in Western Europe. We've really been able to move the needle. And it's not, what I did when I did it was like news. You know what I mean? It was sort of headlines. It was world news. It was like, it was even to an extent shocking, I think, for a lot of people. And it just isn't now. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's the evidence of progress, is that for my parents' generation, what I was doing was really kind of novel and wild and even a bit crazy. Like, why wouldn't you just want to blend in? Why do you want to bring the spotlight onto this thing that, again, that generation sort of want to hide? And for me personally, I don't want to speak for my generation, but certainly for me personally, that was my own evolution of just kind of being able to shed the baggage that my parents had for their own reasons and find my own place in the world, in this body, in how it changes and how I can change it. And now when I look at kids today, it just feels like for so many of them, it's really a no-brainer. And for their parents, that it's not at all shocking that their child could move through the world differently and with complete expectation of equanimity. And I also think that kids, I don't know. I'm sure there's still some aspect of human nature that manifests itself in kids being mean or, bullies and that kind of thing. But I feel like it's far less. I feel like when I walk around today in carbon fiber legs, the reaction in general from anyone is far less fear-based and much more curiosity based and with the presumption of capability and even possibly like a super capability, having that prosthetics will, if they don't already afford me some advantages, which outside of not having my toes being frozen in the winter, or when a cab clips them on the edge of the curb, I'm not going to the hospital. I mean, there are advantages, but but one day in the not too distant future, all of these things, bionics and exoskeletons and prosthetics, there will be a lot of assisted function. And I feel like that's palpable now in the modern lexicon. It's like people get it that, oh, the future is here and their body isn't less than.
Of course.
Yeah, it's an of course to you and I because we've lived it. But
right. No, absolutely. It's not of course to a lot of other people. And, I definitely give obviously kudos to you and me and other people who really kind of take being different bodied to another level. Because not everyone can accept it. So in your TED Talk, you encourage artists and designers to work with medical professionals to create different types of prosthetics. How have you seen the change in your advocacy work, since you began it? What have been the positives?
Well, so there's so many. Like I said, so the thing that was a real novelty 25 years ago, where it was me going to people who didn't have a background in the medical profession, the prosthetic, the kind of historical prosthetic profession. So, Hollywood special effects guys and sculptors and jewelers and wax museum professionals, just so many different kinds of just artists. That has taken on its own life. I mean, there's people who've really built on that. There's something called the Alternative Limb Project, which started like, I think 10 years ago or something like that, is I think really exciting, that people really answered that call, and they really felt empowered, I think, to offer their insight. And when I say insight, I mean with complete ignorance, just to offer what they thought, their ideas would be a good, how this industry, or even just for one person, how it could move forward. I'm always moved by the very specific stories, like this street artist who had I think he fell and he was a serious injury, paralysis injury, and he was in his hospital bed, and his friends figured out how to sort of hack a PlayStation and take, like the little bar that's on top of the television if you're going to play Wii. And, they created the iWriter, right? So they created the software where, using basically $250 worth of over-the-counter parts, they created a tracking software so that he could control his computer with his eyes, create an image with paints and different kinds of artistic software, and they could project it out of his hospital room window onto the side of a huge building, as if he were graffitiing a building, except that this was a transient, image that didn't actually permanently alter the building. It was kind of this beautiful, haunting thing that you got to see if you're driving, in California on the freeway. I mean, I find that incredibly moving. That just people, because they were moved, it was a personal instance, and they didn't have any background in kind of assisted medical technology, and yet they created something profound. So that's one. I think that's probably the major way I've seen things change. And also I think just I think 25 years ago, I sort of expected things to happen really quickly. I had just boundless energy and just absolutely, and I saw, things, I would put an idea out there and people answered, and suddenly I was on a new adventure. And I think I have more patience with what some paths of progress take. And that's more of a personal change for me, but also just wanted to note that there is something about being more patient and understanding that different paths of progress also take on a life of their own. There is no one person, I think, really that steers a specific ship. It takes on a life of its own. A lot of people contribute. They necessarily create their own divergent paths, and that's what I feel. That's what's exciting. There's a bunch of people for whom I was able to be a mentor or a guiding voice or spirit for them, who have thriving, successful careers now, and that's thrilling to me because there was just very few 25 years ago. It was like you really felt like you were an anomaly, and you knew who the other rare anomalies were throughout history, because there would only be a handful of you in the last 100 years. Right. So, and I just feel like that's so different now. And it's also part of the larger movement of a sort of societal fluidity, people wanting to reject kind of traditional buckets of gender, that people want to truly be the architects of their identity and decide, I don't really feel like the person I was 5 years ago. I feel different, and I want to express that difference now in this way. And I feel like we're seeing so many more people feel I guess emboldened, hopefully, and supported, I hope, enough to do that, to make those leaps. And for me, that's all connected. That sense of claiming an autonomy over your body, over your body and your identity that, for whatever reason, has been designated as other and otherness. But you're saying I reserve the right to celebrate it nonetheless.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I mean, I think we all need to celebrate it versus hide it or, yeah. So can you explain the process of the carbon fiber prosthetic legs? Or
the design of them?
Yeah, like the design process of them, and like how long, and how long, does it take to make them? I mean, these are really,
well, not that long anymore. I mean, obviously fitting any prosthetic to a human being is the process, because there's stages, right, where you cast the person's residual limb, and then you make a mold, and you fit that, and then you put the mold on kind of very basic prosthetic, so that you can kind of gauge height and your where your hips are level, and your knees and all that kind of stuff. And then it's just assembling components, really, and they're pieces that are produced. For me, the very first pair in the world, it was like full trial and error, and I flew out to San Diego. There's a little suburb called Escondido, and a wonderful prosthetist there, Wayne Wilkerson, his wife Chris, they were working with Van Phillips, who had invented FlexFoot, which was kind of definitely a major milestone in prosthetic history. developed in the 80s. And, Van was an engineer by training, and basically me being a bilateral amputee, so both sides was saying it was like sort of the worst thing for a prosthetist, because if you have one flesh and bone leg, you just model the prosthetic. So you just need to get it to match. Like, you just need, your shape is already there, but also here's your height, and here's the pronation of the feet, and here's the alignment we need to match. And so it's a different and trickier process when it's a big question mark below the knee. And it's kind of like the princess and the pea. Like, I don't really know if I'm level until I'm up and walking in them. And even if they might be level from a measurement standpoint, what it does when it's on my body and I'm walking the way I have to walk on any kind of given terrain, it'll change obviously with gravel or sand or concrete or grass, mud. That's just it's a process that from my whole life up until I was, whatever that was, 18, 19, when I met Van, it's like, oh gosh, it's such a headache for them. But this was an instance where, Van has a fantastic brain with an extraordinary imagination. So the idea that I was trying to become the fastest woman on the planet with prosthetic legs, and if I don't have to have them, meaning this kind of shin foot thing that every prosthetic, and most of them still are, it's a shin shape and a foot shape. And so no matter how great your form and your stride, you're going to be striking with the heel every single stride, which is just slowing you down. Whereas when you watch a sprinter run, they run like a cat. They're just like up on the balls of their feet. Their heels don't touch. So the thinking was, if I'm trying to become the fastest woman on the planet with artificial legs, with prosthetic legs, and I don't have to have human legs, like they don't have to match anything. Why are we even looking at human legs? Why aren't we looking at the fastest thing that runs? So that was the cheetah idea. But then, of course, it is rooted in physics about like the way the ball of the foot. And so the shape of the leg mimics that, yes, hind leg of a cheetah, but also the way in which a sprinter runs so that the balls of their feet hit and nothing else.
Yeah. No, I mean, the design process, and I mean, again, like the way that you're paving the way with these prosthetic legs. I mean, I think it really requires like a lot of attention to detail. And these are, very specialized legs, I should say. And, the more information, the more innovations, there are out there, the better, and better prosthetic legs are going to be. And again, like, you're paving the way for that. And I think it's really wonderful. So you've spoken about the negative connotations of the term, disabled. How, obviously this is obviously important. But what is your goal, I should say, in advocating this to society and, to audiences, worldwide?
Just to get people to think about the words they use. These are words that have a place. You can say there's a disabled vehicle on the side of the highway. And by the way, I know that there are people for whom the word disabled as a identifier is empowering to them. People who find a voice with that word. But it was never something that was used. My parents never described me that way. They never described me as handicapped, which would have been the kind of word of the 80s. And so the first time I'd ever heard it used as a descriptor for me, it was truly jarring because it felt like someone was calling me a redhead when I'm blonde. You know, it's like it's just sort of like what are you seeing that I don't see in the mirror, or that I don't know about myself. And so going down that path, and it was a complete accident. Not an accident, but it was just happenstance that I looked up the word disabled in my thesaurus, you know, like in old school, like not even on the laptop. I had, you know, my well-worn thesaurus from sort of high school and college, and I had already submitted an article I wrote an op-ed piece for Wired magazine, and I'd already sent it in to the editor. And it was just, I just realized I'd never looked up that word. And so I did, and it was at first kind of comical because the words like wrecked, maimed, useless, all the synonyms for the word. And I was reading out loud to my boyfriend at the time, who was sort of getting ready to fix dinner. I was like, get a load of this, listen to this. And so I started reading them, and I only got a handful of words in before I realized if I was going to keep saying it, I was going to start bawling. Mm-hmm. Because it's such a visceral attack. And it made me think, frankly, about how many children people are using that word. And all of this, you know, I just thought, what if I was 8 years old and I had come across it, I had looked it up in the thesaurus? Like how might my self-worth had changed? You know, how would it have changed maybe? Like how would I have felt about myself? And I remember thinking I was so grateful that I was an adult when I found that. But it also made me think we have to protect people. You know, we protect human beings from being sort of lumped in with these, with a concept that uniformly was negative. I mean, even the last two entries for antonyms, the antonyms to disabled were whole and wholesome. And wholesome is like a character assessment. Mm-hmm. I just thought that's so awful that in a completely innocent way, a doctor who's been given a vocabulary to help categorize patients and you know, that he's going to tell some parents their kid is disabled and again, just the immediate presumption was that this whole baggage of heaviness and sadness and literally some of the words were useless and wrecked, done in, done for, counted out. I mean, just helpless. Hope. I mean, it just was very upsetting to me. So I think what I had hoped to do, what I think I had done with that particular TED Talk was ask people to just consider the words we use. They have power. Mm-hmm. And the words we use might have a more lasting and damaging effect on a person's capability in this world than medical reality. Mm-hmm. Because we do know that somebody's sense of self-worth, their sense of possibility, their sense of hope, their sense of their own willpower in their environment has so much to do with their sense of success. Mm-hmm. And so it was just that. It was just getting people to think about, like I said, you know, there's some adults for whom the word disabled or the word crip, you know, like there's an empowerment that they derive from it. And I'm all in support of for people doing what works for them, but they're adults and they can choose that. Whereas I think when we see this towards, for human beings who don't have a choice, like for instance, children, we should have more care.
Yeah. No, I would totally agree. And I think, again, I think it's really important to celebrate these terms. But, I do think, and I think it also has to do with a lack of acceptance and awareness in society, that people look down. I mean, disabled. Personally, I don't think of it as anything. Honestly, I wake up every day. I don't even think about my brain injury. I definitely obviously know my challenges, but it's just who I am. And these words, they're powerful. And I don't think they should be downplayed. So you're also a model, which is wonderful. I should say. But have you seen, from your work as being a model, that the way society views beauty, especially among people that are amputees or, have medical conditions and so forth, have you seen it change at all?
Definitely. I wouldn't say especially with amputees or people with medical conditions. I'm just saying, I think
just in general. You can say that as well.
Far more open to the blanket word would be difference. The idea that seeing more models of color or, older models in our advertising or models with Down syndrome or models, or trans models, the idea that should be different is problematic because they are part of our society, the spectrum of society. We just never saw it in fashion advertising before. And, again, it was 20 something years ago that I started in that world. But now I feel like that people are just breaking down, they're just blasting through the remaining barriers, which I find really exciting. I find it very exciting that people have used whatever kind of autonomous power they can find in the internet to promote themselves, promote a vision of themselves as powerful, attractive, beautiful, sexy, and let the people decide. Let consumers decide. There's been really interesting campaigns in the last couple of years, but I really do feel like, again, it was a very lonely world 20 something years ago when I started. And the people that, the little tribe that we knew we were kind of the oddballs would have been, again, nobody with any kind of medical difference. It would have been the one African model who was really working at the time, or another model who had a very striking profile because her nose was an amazing shape. It almost sounds silly, but that was whoa, we're allowing those people onto the catwalk. Where I just feel like today there is a completely different celebration of the uniqueness and the things that would have been considered flaws. Now, that said, we have the highest rates of plastic surgery that we've ever seen. There's all these filters on people's phone cameras so that it blurs out what's going on your face. So, there are these two paths where there are people that want to be more and more individual and more kind of the unique selves that they are. And there are people that want to kind of assimilate to an idea of beauty that they find attractive, but they don't maybe genetically inherit.
Yeah, I think also, and again, we're just talking about society as a whole, but I think there is a misconception that the more beautiful you are, the more accepting you'll be in society. Your chances of, being, whatever, if you're single, being in a relationship, or even like employment and, friendship. I think it's gone to a certain level. I mean, especially on like Instagram and like TikTok and whatever the case may be. And I really do think that it's harming a lot of people. I mean, people are getting eating disorders, people are dealing with mental health issues. But that's the only way that they sadly, I think, feel more secure in their bodies. And everyone's beautiful. It doesn't have to be physically. It can be also, internally and, personality wise.
Well, you hope it's those things.
You've stated that prosthetics can be wearable art as opposed to just a functional replacement of, a body part. Can you share a little bit more about this quote?
Well, I mean, hopefully it was, it should speak for itself. They can be wearable art. The majority of emphasis on prosthetic design is about functionality, which obviously makes sense. Right. We need to solve the problems of how can we make prosthetic limbs do this, or, the knee bends or ankle bends, or we can have a more natural gait so we don't have to torque our bodies so hard walking. But there is another place that was always kind of dismissed, aesthetics, just being like, hey, if we get there, great, but that's not the primary goal. And I think as a teenager, I really railed against that, because the frivolity in it and the kind of perceived triviality of what a prosthetic looked like, I found have far more power in creating conversations and getting people to think differently about the object, in changing how I felt wearing it, and changing how people perceived me when I would be wearing different kinds of legs. So it was absolutely visceral, the how powerful that was for me, in the way that, people understand how a haircut changes you, or the great eyebrows, or red lipstick, or a well-fitting suit. It changes the way you move through the world, and it changes the way you feel about yourself, even just temporarily. So I think that, and I was able to do it with some of the best artists living, but have extraordinary people make prosthetics for me and have them literally become museum pieces, but also just be these incredibly beautiful objects of art that were like a poem in a leg. And art is always the most powerful communicator, because you just have to show it and allow someone to have their own interaction with it. And great art changes people, even in subtle ways. And that for me was a kind of important manifesto as a young woman. Was even the extraordinary inventors I was working with on the kind of sprinting side and with carbon fiber and all that stuff were really dismissive about my desire to want to wear different kinds of shoes and wear high heels, and they were very dismissive about it in a way that really irked me. And I just thought, well, moving on, I'm going to find people who get it, who get the power in this taking an object that had always represented loss or blending in, or, I mean, if from an aesthetic point of view, I mean, obviously it represents mobility first and foremost, which is, which is important, which is hugely important, but also important was the story it could tell. Mm-hmm. Story it doesn't tell, and that's where, again, today it's just a no-brainer that your average prosthetic office in North America, a 6-year-old girl can go in and she can have anything she wants put on that prosthetic. She can have it wrapped with whatever kind of imagery she wants. And, that wasn't happening before sort of 15 years ago.
Well, this was wonderful, Aimee. You're an inspiration.